my name is Nicklas Byriel. I work in 3D Viz. I've been teaching 3D visualization like 12 years now. I'm the head of department for our 3D visualization. My interest in 3D and the field of 3D goes way back. I was introduced at a very young age, like in 1990, at the age of 3 or something. I actually got my own first computer. We had multiple computers in our home. And my brother, who's like 7 years older than me, he was already doing all kinds of crazy stuff. He was making his own PCBs in school, and he was really into electronics. And eventually got more and more interested into what can you create with a computer. And I got inspired through those things, and that really came about in the 90s, where LAN parties, which was much more a thing. We had these demo parties for what would be called the scene, where people would do like 64K demos and all of these crazy things. And I saw these and grew up seeing all of these, and got inspired into like, oh, I want to do that. So I think in 92 or something like that, I got my hands on a 3ds Max license. Don't ask how. But I had a computer and there was a 3ds Max installed on it. I was just messing around with primitives like spheres and cylinders and boxes, and I figured out eventually how to apply like a few materials on it from like the default libraries that was there and default textures, and just trying to create things. Eventually, when I became a teenager, I then started actually participating in these LAN parties and began being part of these groups and wanting to do more artist related stuff. And that just kind of evolved into an interest in, hey, maybe I can make a living out of doing 3D. So I started researching schools and eventually found one. From there, it just kind of took off into a way different kinds of fields within 3D. The games that came out, movies, and seeing Pixar and Disney movies, and playing games for my case, it was especially Blizzard. Growing up with Warcraft and all of these things, and seeing especially the cinematics and how amazing they were, that really made me want to, like, I want to do that. I want to be part of something like that. Then realizing later on in life, as I learned more about how 3D works and how you work with it, that maybe I don't want to work for those kind of companies. I'm not that into the whole conveyor belt style of production workflows where you specialize and do that one thing you're really good at. I'm way more interested in doing a little bit of over here, a little bit over here, and over here. And so I wanted to do a little bit of everything. So I quickly realized that I wanted to be more of a generalist. And I found myself looking more into fields of work within 3D, which allowed me to do multiple things at once instead. So being like a one-man army rather than being dependent of a team of 1,000+ artists or 100+ artists. So I started with actually architectural visualization as an internship. My boss then thought that this isn't for you. You want to do like games and stuff. That's way more you. He thought he had read me in that case, and I was like, no, I think I'm good here. But he didn't agree, so I was fired. And then I got a new internship at a game studio instead. So I actually did online game development for like web-based, like HTML and JavaScript games and the graphics for those. And that was really boring. I gotta be honest, that was just not me at all. But I stuck it out and eventually got my degree. I ended up at a company doing all sorts of things. They did like expos and visualization for expos. I think by accident, I might have written on my resume that I knew After Effects. I didn't that much at the time. They saw the idea that, oh, you can do motion design there, and I quickly had to learn After Effects. More and more jobs of those kind came in, and eventually I made like 1,000+ commercials in motion design for especially football. And that kind of just prepared me to go on my own and try my own thing. So I eventually quit and went to start my own business and try and see how, could I get clients myself? Could I manage all of those things? Because I found the selling part and the interaction with people really interesting as well. And that actually went way better than I would ever have anticipated in terms of how fast I was able to get into the industry and get clients and do work for them. But that also forced me into getting even more skills, becoming even more of a generalist, even going into like photography, for example. it's a cliche, right? But it is all about networking. But how do you go about and do that? Networking can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to mean that you need to be on LinkedIn all day. God knows that a lot of people hate doing that. Um, but it can also just be attending parties or events that doesn't necessarily have to be industry specific. It could be any event, really, and seeing the opportunities in the people who attend it and talk to them and actually learn how to talk to people, and go up to them and just introduce yourself. A person you've never met before, they don't know you, you don't know them, just start talking to them and see how well that goes. Eventually, when you've done that a few thousand times, someone will get back to you, knowing that, oh, that was this guy, he really knew, or a girl obviously, that he really knew that what they were doing, and we need a guy that could help us do visualizations in my case, and help us promote our product or whatever it might be. I did that a lot. And eventually you'll learn to know more and more people, and they will start talking, hopefully, about you to their friends as well. And eventually, some point, you would get a call from someone you don't know. You don't have their number, but for somehow they got yours, and they will ask, "Hey, I heard that you're really good at doing this or that. Are you a guy?" And then you got to be sharp and say, yeah, of course I am. And then take it from there, and make it into an actual job. You just got to put in the legwork, and it takes a lot of time, but eventually you'll get more and more experience in that, and you will learn how to sell yourself. When I started my own business, from day one I had a few clients lined up, that could at least ensure me a month's rent or something like that in pay. So I didn't, go completely broke on day one. That was my biggest fear. I think that's most people's fear. And going on your own is like, it's like the scariest thing you could probably do. Eventually, after I think 6 months, 8 months time, I stumbled upon a post on an online forum. A guy I didn't know about, he posted that they needed like a freelancer to join a school, and to teach a class in 3D. It was very non-specific, and I thought, well, okay, this is a good chance for me to, you know, go out and get a decent income through just doing that as a freelancer, and could still find jobs on the side. I could basically work as much as I kind of wanted on the side. I contacted this person, and it just took off from there. Basically, I ended up getting a contract for I think 6 months, and it kind of grew on me. The whole communicating with people, and trying to convey information to young people, and teach them how to do what I was doing. I took a lot of inspiration in my teacher and how his style was. So I kind of mimicked that in the beginning, and then eventually finding my own way and what worked for me. And eventually, after about 6 months, I was asked if I wanted a full-time employment, on the basis that I could keep my own company still and keep doing what I was still doing on the side, because they really valued the work experience and real life experience I had on that side, and took that into the classroom. I ended up staying there for about 10 years while also taking a bachelor's degree in pediatrics and learning more about people. I think one of the things that we start realizing at some point, or at least I realized at some point, is that not every job, in fact, very few of the jobs that you end up getting, are impressive at the end result for anyone else. Um, the job consists of trying to figure out what it is the client even wants, and you spend a lot of time doing that. So the end result doesn't necessarily look that impressive, because you actually ended up spending just a lot of time with the client and figuring out with the client what they wanted. So it just ends up looking like, oh, you could have done that in a day, but it ended up taking a month, because nobody knew that was the end result at the beginning. And you kind of tend to forget that as well. One of the more fun projects I ended up doing, I was hired as a photographer for Koenigsegg in Sweden, and capturing their then new car, which was called a Koenigsegg 1-to-1. So we did a photo shoot with that car. At the time, only two cars of that was in existence. This was the first customer car, and the other was their in-house production car. And eventually it ended up being six cars, and they're worth a fortune. But that was like a dream come true for me, because I'm very much into cars. That's probably one of the things that stood out for me. Day in the life of a viz artist would probably be, it's a full-time, it's a stable job. It's something that there's a high demand for. So it's a place where hopefully you have a lot of great colleagues that you can talk to and have, a good time with as well. But it's also, in most cases, there's like no crunch time. You know what you gotta do the day you meet in. You also probably know what you're gonna work on for the next few weeks in terms of projects that are already like booked in. Depending on the type of workplace that you have, you might end up doing interior visualizations for a kitchen company, or furniture visualization for IKEA, could be a good example. But it could also be in the automotive industries, where you're doing car renders, or you do medical, or whatever it might be. And that can be in so many different types of companies. So it doesn't have to be a 3D specific company. It could even be a company that just has a product and they need help marketing their own product. So you're part of a marketing department. So it would be a great additional skill to know, your way around the whole Adobe suite. You might find yourself needing to learn how to use Adobe InDesign, for example, because people need brochures or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of versatility. You don't necessarily need to do these things, but there's a lot of value added to your skill set if you can add multiple things within marketing, for example. Getting into 3D visualization now would be, there's no better time than just joining basically and starting your career path towards visualization. Even if it's not even visualization that you're actually interested in, if you're just interested in getting into the whole 3D industry, we all know that there might be a bit of uncertainties in some of the different industries right now. At the very least, visualization makes you a generalist. So it gives you a lot of great skills that you can even take and then join later on. AI eventually will be a part of visualization. It already is in our rendering engines in many cases. We have like AI denoisers and a lot of different things. Right now, it looks like the next step would be AI generated materials and maybe cleanups in your like the post processing of your images or animations. Keeping on top of those skills and learning how to use them now so that you won't be left behind in the dust. I'm not really afraid of it as something that's going to take away our jobs. On the contrary, it's just another tool to help us get a better result at the end of the day. And most of them are enhancing rather than generating from the ground up. You still need a really good foundational knowledge in how to use these tools and what makes a good image, what makes a good render, what makes a good 3D model, whatever it might be. And without that knowledge, you wouldn't be able to tell even an AI what to do with its image to make it even better. The stuff that we teach is still very relevant, even the old stuff. But obviously, it's all evolving into new things, and it's going to be exciting, I think. It'll just give us more tools into how we can create more photorealistic stuff even faster. With the foundational knowledge, I really do mean learning what a good lighting setup is, what a good composition is, what negative space might mean, what, having good margins and doing good storytelling as well. It's those basics that an AI usually isn't the most creative on. It might make something look pretty good as an image, but the image itself probably is soulless and doesn't tell us any story. The composition might be off, and you need to have really good understanding on how to build an image from the ground up in order to direct even an AI into becoming the actual story that was the important part. The realism doesn't really matter if the story is all wrong. If you're not selling the product that you're supposed to sell, it's that foundational knowledge that we're really focusing on. The technical stuff is not that hard. The problem is all of the creative stuff around it. It's the storytelling, it's the compositions and all of those different things, and making it work together. That's the hard part. Looking at how the industry for 3D visualization specifically and how it might evolve in the next couple of years is obviously as hard as anything else to predict, especially now with AI being more and more of a thing and not really realizing how much it might be a thing. We obviously do look forward and try and figure out beforehand what we should teach our students, which skills are needed when they're done with the education here. I just so happen to have taken part in a panel discussion with Chaos recently, where we discussed this very subject from different angles as well. I was there representing education. I had a lot of friends there as well who represented both small and big businesses and what it meant for them. And I would definitely recommend going over and looking into that panel discussion.